Well, ladies and gentlemen, again, welcome to another session of Victorious Friday. As I always promise, we have a special guest. Well, today is no exception. I have a dear friend coming around that we're getting to know each other and connecting. And so I'd like to introduce to you today, Stephen Arterburn, who I'm going to call Steve for the rest of this interview, unless he corrects me. Steve, welcome to Victorious Friday.
Thank you, Terrence. Great to be with you, and so great what you're doing to help parents, grandparents in one of the most difficult times to do anything for a child. It's really tough.
It is. I mean, I'm looking at just stats. It's just to kind of throw out things. Well, we're looking at a 1% biblical worldview for those who are in college, and that's a challenging time. We're looking at a 93% decline in biblical worldview overall since about 50 years ago. We're looking at a situation today where I say 83 to 85% of parents who want to do the right thing, their hearts are in the right place, and these are Christian parents, but yet they feel totally inadequate to raise their children in the Lord. And you know all too much about that. You've written about them. I mean, I got to share a little bit, Steve, about your background. I mean, as I look at this extensive bio, I can't read it all. We'll be here all day, just kind of going through the details. But there's some final points I did want to just point out. I mean, we're talking to someone. I'm looking at numbers, which is incredible. Author of more than 15,000 books in print. I mean,
No, it's
15
15
million.
million. 15.
15 million books in print. Come on, Terrence, let's get that together. All types of awards, from Gold Medallion and every man. And I'm loving just some of the books, but there's some things that's on your heart today we're going to talk about. And there's just much more I'm going to share. Why don't you give us just a brief history? How did all this get started? How did the Lord start to move in your heart and mind and soul to start writing content that has impacted people all around the world, not just this nation?
Well, to try to make it as brief as possible, I had a horrible experience in college and was really just horrifically apart from the Lord, and then found some hope and healing. And I wanted other people to find that too. I didn't want them to have to go what I went through. So I went to seminary to study counseling, but I didn't really like it. I wanted to deal with people with more severe problems. And so I went to work as an orderly cleaning toilets at night in a psych hospital. And then that I moved up to a vice president in the organization there. And some men came to me and said, would you like to start your own organization? If you do, we'll find the money. And so they gave me a few $1 million and I started New Life Treatment Centers. And what we did is we had 32 psychiatric treatment programs in psych hospitals around the country. Then that became New Life Ministries. And out of New Life came Women of Faith. We had over 5 million women fill arenas all over the country, 18,000, 20,000 women, and over 500,000 came to Christ. Also, we developed the Life Recovery Bible, which has just now sold over 4 million Bibles that bring the recovery movement back to the Bible where it started. And then Every Man's Battle was a book that, well, it's over 4 million now. And many men say to me, it was the thing that saved their ministry, changed their life, saved their marriage. So all of that stuff together, I've loved writing all through that. And one of the most important books I've written was a book called Toxic Faith, and that's about some really unhealthy churches. And everything I wrote about years ago it's come to fruition in so many churches, sadly. And then probably the other book I love the most, other than Every Man's Battle, would be Healing is a Choice, the 10 choices that give you the greatest chance for God to heal you. And it might not be physical healing, but healing in every other way, like grieving, rather than just superficially saying, I forgive you. You need to grieve what was taken, stolen, all of that. Then you can accept, and then you can fully forgive. But healing is a Choice is a really important book for me. This is the new book coming out next month, Every Believer's
Yes.
Thought Life. Of course, that's about everything. If you can't take your thoughts captive, then they're going to lead you down a path that you're going to regret, and you're going to hurt people and hurt yourself.
Well, Steve, hold that book up once again. It sounds like Victorious Friday has a scoop on this thing. Every Believer's Thought Life. And as we look at that, there's some patterns of behavior and thinking in there. Talk to me a little bit about your book and what motivated, inspired you to write that book that's coming out. And by the way, when is it coming out?
It comes out the 1st of January, so it's
okay.
Quick. And I actually have a pre-launch group. If you want to join it, you can go to newlife.com, get all sorts of free stuff. But if we have, let's just call it a trigger, something triggers us into an old pattern, we need to have a way to not fall into that. And so it's either having an image that we put up in our head that is an image of the destruction I'm headed toward, or the hopeful, wonderful godliness that I want to portray, the godly man I want to be. It's either continue in that thought, or it's to have a scripture that I've found that truly helps me change that thought pattern. It's either isolate and sin, or connect with a brother and ask for prayer, ask for them to come over, ask if I can go see you, or it's getting involved in one of the many, many meetings where I can gather with other strugglers online. So it's just developing choices and then having them in place. It's just like, if you are parachuting and it doesn't open, you instantly go for that second parachute versus say, well, I don't know what to do. Looks like I'm going to die. So if you don't have that in your head, you'll never do it. If you didn't know the second parachute was there, you wouldn't pull it. So here we just try to have this pattern in us that replaces the old patterns so that I don't end up hurting myself and others.
Steve, as I think and I listen to you, I think about the amount of depression and anxiety and things of that nature that's happening, not only in our country, probably around the world. Obviously, we just come off of a pandemic of ages that I've never can remember. I think over 500,000 deaths in the U.S., et cetera. What would you say is the trigger there? I mean, what's causing these anxieties, especially in young people? And I'm seeing that devastate the family as a whole.
Well, you mentioned biblical worldview. I have a platform that's a biblical worldview. A lot of things I'm confused about in life, but I'm not confused about whether the Bible is God's word, that it's the true truth. Jesus died on the cross. I can't get to heaven unless I accept the penalty he paid. I have that foundation. I may sin, but I have a foundation to come back to. If you don't have that foundation, you're just wandering out there. You're just going from one thing to the other. So that produces a bit of despair, but also naturally you're going to be anxious in such an uncertain world. You don't know what's going to happen next, where you're going to go, because you don't have any roots, you don't have a foundation, you don't have a platform on which to live. So that is why when a pandemic like this comes along, there are some Christians that say, well, worst case is I'd die and I'd go be with the Lord. That takes away a lot of just this free floating anxiety if I can live with the worst case. Or, man, I might end up being unable to function. But if that's where God has me, I'm going to be okay if I'm following God. So they're just different approaches that we have as believers that the unbeliever doesn't. And this world, there's a phrase, I actually invented a phrase called toxic tribal affinity. And that is that groups of people know they're on the wrong track, but because they don't want to stand out or not be part of their group, they don't say anything. There are therapists, secular therapists, that know it isn't right for a 7-year-old to begin transitioning their body at age 7. And they use a fatal lie like, well, we don't want the child to commit suicide. Well, there are things you can do to prevent suicide other than help them transition. There was a time, if you didn't like the way your body was or felt, we helped you to come to accept the body that you have rather than begin mutilating a 7-year-old or 8-year-old.
Yeah.
So that all of that produces anxiety. God says to us, be not afraid. Many times through scripture, if you don't believe in God or you don't think God cares about you, you're going to be afraid. If you believe in God, you trust his word when he says, be not afraid. I am with you until the end of the earth. I won't reject you. I won't fail you. So those foundations that you and I have and others, when you don't have that, you ought to be anxious,
Yeah.
and in despair. I don't know how you get by, really.
Man, it makes a lot of sense. You know, as I think about and I talk to parents all around the world and here in the US, and I'm seeing just this, and my heart is grieving in areas because they're struggling with, as you said, they're struggling with purpose. They're struggling with meaning. You know, they're struggling with, you know, and as you know, we're focused around the family. And so we look at how are families flourishing? Are they thriving? Or how are they connecting in relationship with their children, even their grandchildren? And and we're finding, and I'm an optimist by nature, so I'll just simply say parents want to do the right thing. They just struggle in how to do that and how to approach it. And when I look at the patterns of life as it relates to family, it appears that those patterns are taking us to a point of crisis in a lot of cases. And I know in your new book you talk about those patterns of life that lead us to somewhere, and sometimes that's down that right road, and sometimes it's down a road of destruction, not intentionally.
Yeah.
But it sometimes it could lead towards that, like I say, lack of purpose, lack of meaning, lack of identity. Um, what
And
would your assessment be?
well, let me just talk about this new horrific problem of the grandparents of a grandchild knows what they need, sees problems that are there, but the parents, their kids, reject them. And when the grandparent tries to help the grandchild, many times they become a little too aggressive for this entitled child that they created. And then the grandparents are cut off from the grandchildren. And so rather than have a positive influence on the grandchildren, they're eliminated from their lives. And now these kids that they raise that are now that are adult parents, they're doing a horrible job and nobody there, excuse, and nobody there to help them. So what do we do about that? Well, as grandparents, you have to be really careful because the worst thing is to do something that gets you cut off. So you need to be wise and discerning because you don't want to be pushed out of the grandkids' lives. And then as parents, look, if you resent your parent and you have a child, you are teaching your child how to grow up and resent you. So you better get over this and you better fix this with your parents and you better show them connection and show your children how we can all generation after generation be for each other and work out our issues. Otherwise, you are creating generations of despair and you think you're doing the right thing, but you're not. You're hurting your own children.
Hmm. Boy, that's powerful, Steve. Maybe is there maybe one, two, or three things that grandparents need to be thinking about to avoid that relationship that leads to despair?
Yeah, well, first of all, you don't ever want to do something to the grandchild that the parents don't want. Let's say that, your grandchild has a mullet. Well, we know that that's from Satan. No, I'm kidding. But it's some kind of hair thing, and you go take them to the barber shop and cut their hair because you don't like it. Okay, that's just an extreme, obvious example. But then, your kids are going to go, well, you can't ever be with our kids anymore if you're going to do something like that. So you don't want to do things that they don't approve of. And then if there is something that you don't agree with, you don't go in and say, this is the way it ought to be. You go in asking your kids, tell me, help me understand, why this is what you think is good. Just curious. And you're always for your children and for your grandchildren. One of the most valuable things you can do is start writing your grandchildren letters, real live handwritten letters. They love it. They don't get any of those anymore. And that's where you can have some real great influence on them from a positive perspective. You think it through. Maybe you even have a book that you're saying, okay, here's the idea that the book's trying to get across. And you just write that in your own words to your grandchildren. These are the kind of things that are smart. Also, don't overreact. When your child is angry at you for what you did with the grandchild, don't overreact. You want to connect with, oh, I see how that could be upsetting. Okay, that's never going to happen again. See, I really believe in grandparents and I believe in great parents, but sadly, too many of the parents today are very confused and have been led astray already.
Yeah, sure is. Man, see, we could probably go for hours in this topic, but we let's turn back to man. We met a few months ago, and we were just chatting at the Museum of the Bible,
Right.
and we were there with a gathering called the Gap project, the Great Awakening Project, and we had a chance to just meet and talk and share a little bit. And I heard just some stories and so forth. And I says I have to have Steve on the show, and that led us to today. Uh, Tell us about the Great Awakening Project. What's happening there? Why were you there? What's on your heart? What led you and motivated you to spend some very valuable days out of your schedule to come to Washington D.C. at the Museum of the Bible and sit in and say, what's happening and why should I be here and spend my expertise and energy.
Well, first of all, I'm a Bible person, and between my wife and me, we have created over 13 specialty Bibles, study Bibles, devotional Bibles, and so when I heard about the Museum of the Bible, I became a founding donor, and then to my wonderful surprise, when it opened, one of my Bibles is on display in the Museum of the Bible. So I love that museum, and I had an idea of how to help more people find the museum. And Steve Green, who really is the founder of Museum of the Bible, when I shared that idea, he said, let's do it. And so we created a new women's movement called Lumina. And we had an event. We'll have a couple more in 2003 and 4 in 2004. But that's how I got associated with all these people. And then I was invited to the Great Awakening Project, and I wanted to come because so many people think that we're beyond revival, we're beyond restoration, and we're not. And I wanted to see what was the plan. And I wanted to be part of the plan if it was a great plan. And I didn't want to be part of it if I wasn't. But it's a great plan, and it's got people like you. I mean, I have some things I've done. I think your accomplishments are just stunning and stellar, and they're in the real world, not the fake world of ministry. I believe everybody has a calling, and I think when people are out there in the real world, the secular world, making a difference, that is a big part of the Great Awakening. When they see competent, confident people who share Christ and live like Christ. But anyway, I wanted to be there because I wanted to see if the Great Awakening Project had a plan to involve the people that would make it possible. And I think there are two types of people, or two groups that make it possible. One, pastors. If you can't get pastors on board, you're not going to have the Great Awakening. Now, God can do anything without pastors, but it just makes sense you'd want them to be part of this. And then the other thing, women. This can't just be a bunch of old white guys getting together wanting to change the world. If you're not inspiring and equipping women in the Great Awakening Project, then you're not going to do well, because the greatest influence in the home and in the community is what women are doing. While us men are out these little missions and other things, the women are really making a huge difference. When a man is supposed to lead in the home, many men think that means be a dictator. But what it means is to be the first one to be up praying and reading the Bible, first one to say, I'm sorry, first one to really serve, first one to say, I'm not going to go golfing on this day because my family needs me at home. That's the leadership that I think Christ wants for a man in the home. And, when you take dance lessons, usually the woman is a better dancer, but the guy is called to lead. If he wasn't, he'd get left behind. Well, who knows more about the home, the man or the woman? The woman. But the guy's called to lead, because if he didn't, he wouldn't even have a place. So I really think that at the pastor level, the female level, along with great men, this can happen. But if you leave out pastors and women, probably not. So I was delighted to see that there's a great plan for the Great Awakening.
Mm-hmm. When I look at and think and was listening in on the Great Awakening Project, and just amazing people there.
Yeah.
And the challenges that we all face, as you say, it's nothing new. I just remember even in Judges 2:10, talks about just one generation after Joshua passed away, an entire nation began to worship other gods. And so we've been in a worse place, although it seems like we're in a terrible place today. But obviously we want our families to flourish. We want our communities to thrive. We want our nation. And I believe no nation can really thrive beyond its spiritual condition. And I think we have a spiritual crisis today as well. And I was looking at one of the reports there that talked about trust, and the trust of our leadership in terms of clergy, and the trust of our churches and so forth. And it seemed to be at one of the lowest levels I've ever seen it before.
Horrible.
And so I think there's an opportunity there. And the question, how do we regain that trust in our leadership, in our pastors, in our churches, et cetera, who I believe, like you say, has a very intricate role in the reversal of this pattern that we're in today. What would your thoughts be?
Well, I think it's true. And I think the day of the preacher pastor that thinks they can't share about their own struggle, I think that day needs to have been passed. We need to see ourselves, I'm a pastor, as fellow strugglers with everybody else. And we need to share that we don't have it all figured out. Our marriages aren't all perfect. And that draws people to you, versus acting like a big shot that knows everything and doesn't have a struggle. That doesn't help. So I think authenticity is a big deal, and humility is a big deal, and a heart for Jesus. And the shocking thing is how many people in the pastorate don't really believe Jesus is the only way to heaven. And so when we can help pastors become the godly pastors that God has called them to be, then we're really changing the world. The people that don't believe like us, they don't meet every week, and yet they have such influence in the world. It's just stunning how much influence. We get together every week, and we we're just not inspiring and igniting people to go out and make a difference. And I got to tell you, that Great Awakening project, there are people there that are multi-millionaires that go out on the street and witness to people and win people to Christ person to person every week.
Mm-hmm.
If we could get more people at every income level to do that, it would sure make a big difference. But so often we say, well, this isn't my gift, or this isn't what I'm called to do. And we just leave it to somebody else, and we need to be part of it.
You know, well, I want to land this plane, Steve, is, you know, our passion at Victoria's Family is around the family, and particularly the parents. And, you know, I'm a product of discipleship. And so I believe very much in life on life missional discipleship.
Yeah.
And in our organization, what we do is we want parents to be more intentional as the spiritual leaders of their home. And I think that, at least from the research that I find, is that parents have abdicated that responsibility. They've abdicated it to the church, to Christian camps, Christian schools. And in my mind, we need to kind of go back and where the foundation is built in the home and is supported by the church. I'm an elder in the church, pastor in the church. And so I know how important the church is. But at the same time, we as parents need to take up that mantle and begin to say, for me and my household, we're going to kind of walk down this pathway and be intentional about it. Not just kind of wherever the wind blows, but how are we going to be intentional in raising our kids in the Lord? Our scripture verse is Ephesians 6:4, which speaks to fathers, and I just wrap that around parents. Fathers, don't exasperate your child, which, you know, I was getting pretty much an A+ in that exasperation thing. But it says to bring them up in the training and instruction of the Lord. And to me, that's family discipleship. Have we lost our way in family discipleship? And if so, how do we regain that pattern of life where we begin to be the spiritual leaders starting in our home?
Yeah, you know, so many people find it easy to go to church, say the right things, talk about God, and I use the word integration, but it's not integrated into their everyday life. And so from pastor to first-time attender, you've got people going to church and then coming back home and creating a hellish environment, the exasperation piece back there. I can tell you, there's nothing better for a man who's going to lead, for him to get involved with some other godly men in a group where they can share openly with each other and learn some new things. Out there on your own, you just drift. So my number one encouragement for men who want to truly do what's right at home, get involved with some other men who have kids too and are figuring this out. And the second thing is, women, you can exasperate your children. You know, we don't want a man dictator and a woman doormat, nor do we want this other thing where the wife becomes like the angry mother and the husband the little hurt child. That's exasperating for kids to see too. So we need to find this mutual submission. Ephesians 5:21, submit yourselves one to another out of reverence for Christ. When the parents are mutually submissive to God and each other, their own agenda, their own need, this kind of stuff, all that's secondary to the unity they have. And then the children are drawn to that. And what you have to say and do then has credibility. So it begins with the marriage. It begins with the character of the folks, and especially this guy who's supposed to be the leader. Yeah. That is so important, that you lead, not demand, control, or dictate.
Man, I tell you, you're preaching to me now here, Pastor. It's and you and your wife have written some great resources on this. I mean, I believe the 1 year for women and Bible, and the 1 year
Your
for men
Bible for
Bible.
women,
Yeah, Bible
and
for women. And I
her
think
Bible.
those are great resources.
Well, her
Talk
Bible,
to us.
1 Year Bible for Women,
Yeah.
covers all of the tough passages for women. There are women, I know one specific woman who has a wonderful Christian sister. She's an atheist because of a certain passage that she just never understood, and now doesn't care to understand it. So we can really help women find greater hope and healing in the church because we can help them understand the context, the purpose, and why certain passages are there that are very troubling for women.
Well, Steve, I always like to end with hope, a message around hope. And I like to just give my guest the last word. And so take a minute or two and just share wherever your heart wants to go. And in there, encourage those men and women, grandparents, etc., uh, around family, around hope, or anywhere you want to lead us. But I just want to give you the last minute or two to just share your heart.
Sure. Well, a lot of people don't have hope. Hope has a great resume. If it's true hope, then you can see things that have happened that are miraculous, transformational. But a lot of people are actually wishing, or they have false hope. But real hope comes when we lay ourselves open, humble ourselves before the Lord, let Him lift us up. Also, if you look at some of the worst things that have happened in Scripture, Peter saying he never met Jesus, Aaron, saying he was the first priest, getting people to worship a golden calf. They were restored. God didn't kick them out, didn't reject them. A little man in a tree becomes inspiration for so many people. There is evidence that hope is there if we'll follow the teachings of Christ. I'll leave you with this. John 10:10 doesn't say the truth will set you free. Here's what it says. It says, if you follow my teachings, there's an if, you're truly my disciples, then you will know the truth, and the truth will set you free. All hope, freedom comes from not just knowing the Bible, but living it and being a disciple of Christ, which requires what you've been dedicated to, discipling and being discipled.
Well, I think that's a great place to leave. Steve, I thank you so much for today. We have to do it again. Of course, we'll be working together on some different things. But ladies and gentlemen, I'm so excited. Tell us once again how we can connect with you, your resources, and so forth. Give us the website, give us the information we need.
Well, it's 1-800-NEW-LIFE is the phone number, and then newlife.com is our website. If you go to newlife.com, we also have a New Life app. You can hear our daily radio program. I'll be on there in about 2 hours. We do a weekly live call-in show called New Life Live. It's on Sirius XM, 200 stations around the country, and you can get it at our website, online, a lot of different places. But that's where a lot of people find hope, because we bring in the best Christian counselors possible to give the best direction that we can.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, we've heard it here. Thank you again for attending Victorious Fridays podcast. Click that down, connect with us, let us know your comments or any input from the conversations you've had today or in the past. Steve, thank you once again for taking time, and what a blessing you've been to us today.
Thank you, Terrence. God bless you, man.